My husband's text arrived while I was standing in my kitchen, holding a white bakery box tied with gold string. "Mom doesn't want you at the housewarming party tonight. She says you're an embarrassment." I read it twice, not because I misunderstood, but because some humiliations deserve a full second to settle. Then I smiled. "Understood," I typed. I turned off my phone. What they didn't know was that the $5.8 million mansion they were celebrating had closed 5 days earlier, with money from my trust. 30 minutes later, the party stopped. Not because I showed up. Because the truth did. 3 hours before Ethan's message, I left work early for the first time in months. The finance department at MedCore Systems had just finished a brutal quarterly review, and my team had survived it without a missed forecast or compliance issue. I should have gone home, reheated soup, and spent the evening in sweatpants. Instead, I drove across Charlotte to a bakery in Myers Park because Marilyn loved their lemon layer cake with raspberry filling. The woman behind the counter slid the white box toward me. "Big celebration?" "Housewarming." "For you?" I hesitated. "For family." That was how I described most of my sacrifices for 17 years. Never mine, always for family. A framed photograph sat on the passenger seat beside the cake. It showed Ethan at 8 years old, gap-toothed and sunburned, standing between his parents at a Tennessee lake. His father had died 6 years earlier, and Marilyn still kept the original in a cracked plastic frame. I had paid to have it restored and placed behind museum glass. I imagined her opening it in the new living room, beneath the 14-foot windows, and perhaps looking at me differently. Not warmly. Warmth had never been Marilyn's gift. But fairly. When I got home, Nora was at the kitchen island finishing algebra homework, one sneaker bouncing against the cabinet. "You're home early," she said. "I'm capable of surprising people." She glanced at the cake. "Are you excited about Grandma's party?" "I'm trying to be civilized." That wasn't my question. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. Ethan's name appeared. "Mom doesn't want you at the housewarming party tonight. She says you're an embarrassment." My first reaction was not anger. It was embarrassment that my husband had written it so plainly, as if passing along a weather alert. I typed, "Did you tell her it's my house too?" The typing bubbles appeared, vanished, then returned. Please don't make this harder than it needs to be. I stared at those words. Ethan had used versions of them for years. When Marilyn criticized my clothes at Thanksgiving, "Don't make it harder." When she told Nora that career women neglected their families, "Don't start something." When she seated me beside strangers at her birthday dinner, "Let it go." Every time, peace had meant my silence. For years, I had mistaken endurance for maturity. I told myself Marilyn's remarks were harmless, that Ethan's silence was simply the cost of keeping a complicated family together. But small humiliations do not disappear when ignored. They accumulate quietly until one ordinary message reveals the shape of everything you have been carrying. "What happened?" Nora asked. "Your father says Grandma doesn't want me there." "Why?" "Apparently I'm an embarrassment." Her pencil stopped. "That's insane." "It's familiar." "Are you still going?" I looked at the cake, the photograph, and the handwritten card I had stayed up late composing. "Welcome home. May this house give all of you the stability and peace you deserve." The irony was almost elegant. "No." Nora stood. "Then I'm not going either." "You already told your father you would." "So?" "So you don't have to fight every battle because I'm tired of fighting mine." She folded her arms. "That sounds noble, but it's also convenient." I almost laughed. "You've been spending too much time with me." I told her to go. Lauren's children adored her, and I refused to turn a family conflict into a loyalty test for my daughter. Ethan picked her up 20 minutes later. He did not come inside. From the window, I watched Nora say something to him before getting into his SUV. His shoulders tightened. Then they drove away. I carried the cake to the refrigerator and placed the photograph on the dining table. Marilyn had spent years implying that Ethan supported me. She called my work corporate bookkeeping, even after I became chief financial officer. She told relatives I was good with numbers, as though I could merely split a restaurant bill. Ethan never corrected her. At first, I believed he was avoiding conflict. Later, I understood that he enjoyed the man her misunderstanding allowed him to be. 3 months earlier, when Lauren's divorce turned ugly and her children faced changing schools, Ethan asked me to help. Marilyn had sold her old home, expecting to downsize, then decided she needed room for Lauren and the children. The mansion had not been my idea. The structure had. Hawthorne Residential Holdings LLC, owned by my family trust, purchased the property as a long-term asset. Marilyn would live there under a formal occupancy agreement. Lauren would contribute toward utilities once she found stable work. No one could borrow against the house, transfer it, or treat it as collateral. The purchase took 11 weeks: inspections, title review, trust approval, escrow, and insurance. 5 days earlier, my trust wired the final funds. That evening, Marilyn posted a photograph online. A new beginning, made possible by my wonderful son. Ethan stood beside her, holding the keys. I waited for him to correct her. He never did. Now I understood why. I texted him one word: understood. Then I turned off my phone and called Daniel Cho, the real estate attorney who managed the trust's property transactions. He answered on the second ring. Claire? I need you to pause the occupancy agreement. Silence. Has something changed? Yes. Are you asking to revoke tonight's access? No, let the event finish. I'm not locking children or guests outside. Daniel exhaled. Then what do you want? Do not release the permanent access codes. Do not authorize deliveries after midnight. Have the property manager bring the ownership documents. Once this starts, there won't be a discreet way to contain it. For 17 years, discretion had meant swallowing pain privately. I know. Are you sure? I looked at the bakery box in my refrigerator, then at the restored photograph waiting on the table. For the first time in a long time, I said yes. 30 minutes later, as Marilyn raised a champagne glass before more than 40 guests, the property manager entered the foyer carrying a leather folder. According to Nora, the room quieted slowly. He looked at the flowers, the catering staff, the investors Ethan had invited, and the family gathered beneath a chandelier none of them owned. Then he asked one question. Who here is legally authorized to occupy this property? For years I had imagined confronting Marilyn. In every version, I stood in front of her, looked her in the eye, and finally said everything I had swallowed since the day Ethan introduced me. Instead, I wasn't even in the room. Sometimes the strongest moment of your life happens while you're sitting alone in your own kitchen. I didn't know exactly what was happening inside the mansion. I only knew what Daniel had promised to do. Then I waited. The waiting turned out to be harder than making the decision. I made tea that I never drank. I washed dishes that were already clean. I caught myself straightening a stack of mail simply because my hands needed something to do besides shake. I wasn't shaking because I feared Marilyn. I was shaking because 17 years of keeping the peace had taught my body that standing up for myself was dangerous. Around 8:30, Daniel called. Are you somewhere private? I am. The property manager followed every instruction. I closed my eyes. Tell me. Daniel spoke calmly, the way attorneys do when facts matter more than emotions. The party was in full swing when he arrived. Your mother-in-law was giving a toast. I could almost picture Marilyn. Champagne flute in one hand. Perfect hair. Perfect smile. Standing beneath the grand staircase, she had already begun calling hers. Daniel continued. She thanked Ethan for buying her what she called the home every mother dreams of. That sentence landed harder than I expected. Not because it was new, because Ethan had allowed it to become public. Then, I asked quietly. The property manager waited until the applause ended. I imagined 40 guests turning toward a man carrying a leather portfolio. He introduced himself, congratulated everyone on the celebration, and explained that there were a few occupancy documents requiring clarification before permanent possession could be granted. What did Marilyn say? She laughed. Of course she had. Daniel continued. She told him there must be some mistake because her son owned the property. And Ethan? He didn't correct her. That hurt more than the text message. Not because Ethan lied. Because even after being given one final chance to tell the truth, he chose the lie again. The property manager then explained that the property is owned by Hawthorne Residential Holdings LLC, and that permanent occupancy authorization had not yet been executed by the owner. I leaned against the kitchen counter. What happened? Marilyn asked Ethan if Hawthorne Residential Holdings was his company. I already knew the answer. He said. Daniel paused. Nothing. Silence. Real silence. The kind that empties a room. The guests began looking at each other. Someone asked whether there had been a paperwork problem. I almost felt sorry for Ethan. Almost. What did the property manager say? He simply explained that the celebration could continue, but no furniture deliveries, contractors, or permanent move-in activities could occur until ownership authorization was completed. Professional. Neutral. Exactly what I'd requested. No accusations. No humiliation. Only facts. Daniel cleared his throat. Claire, there was one thing you didn't anticipate. What? Your husband became angry. I laughed softly. At whom? The property manager. That sounded painfully familiar. When people lose control of a lie, they often attack the nearest messenger. He demanded to know who had authorized this. And? The property manager said the property owner. Daniel didn't need to explain the effect. Everyone in that room knew Ethan wasn't the owner. Not anymore. Or perhaps they had never really known. After hanging up, I sat quietly in the living room. The house felt strangely peaceful. No television. No music. Just the ticking grandfather clock Ethan's father had left us. It had always been one of my favorite pieces. Marilyn once told guests Ethan restored it himself. He hadn't. I'd spent nearly $4,000 hiring a restoration specialist after termites damaged the base. I never corrected her. Not because I enjoyed being invisible. Because I loved Ethan enough to believe his pride mattered more than my recognition. That realization hurt almost more than tonight. At 9:15, my phone buzzed. I had turned it back on. It was Nora. Mom, can you talk? I answered immediately. Are you okay? I'm fine. Her voice sounded steady. Older somehow. What happened? She let out a slow breath. Grandma was embarrassed. I didn't answer. Everyone kept asking Dad questions. What kind of questions? Why isn't Claire here? Didn't Claire help buy the house? Who's Hawthorne Residential Holdings? I closed my eyes. So what did your father say? He kept saying there had been a misunderstanding. There it was again. A misunderstanding. As though truth simply wandered into the wrong room by accident. Nora continued. Grandma started blaming the property manager. And Lauren? She looked confused. That surprised me. Lauren often followed Marilyn's lead, but confusion meant she genuinely hadn't known. There was something else, Nora said. What? I heard Grandma talking before everything happened. My heartbeat slowed. Talking to whom? A group of women. What did she say? Nora hesitated. She said you weren't there because you would have made everyone uncomfortable. I waited. And then she laughed. Another pause. She said Dad had finally stopped letting you control him. The words settled heavily between us. I wasn't crying. Oddly enough, I felt lighter. Because lies spoken in private can haunt you. Lies spoken in public eventually find witnesses. You didn't deserve that, Nora whispered. No. I'm sorry. I smiled sadly. You don't have to apologize for other people's choices. I know, but I wish I could have done something. You already did. What? You paid attention. Silence. Then she laughed softly. You always say that. Because it's true. After we hung up, another call came almost immediately. Ethan. I answered. What happened? He demanded. His voice wasn't sad. It wasn't ashamed. It was furious. You tell me. You humiliated my mother. I leaned back in my chair. No. You absolutely did. I stopped protecting a lie. You could have waited until after tonight. That sentence told me everything. Not. I'm sorry. Not. I should have stood up for you. Not. My mother was wrong. Only, you should have waited. You wanted one more night, I said quietly. What? One more night where everyone believed you bought that house. I never said I bought it. You never corrected anyone who did. He didn't answer. You knew she excluded me. Silence. You knew she called me an embarrassment. More silence. Finally, he said, she didn't mean it like that. I almost smiled. There it was. The oldest sentence in our marriage. The one that excused every insult. Every slight. Every humiliation. I think, I said softly, she meant exactly what she said. Before he could answer, I ended the call. Less than 2 minutes later, Daniel called again. Claire. What now? I was reviewing the closing file. His voice had changed. More cautious. I found something you need to see. What is it? A week before closing, he paused. Suss out Ethan sent copies of the property's preliminary documents to a commercial lender. I sat upright. What? He appears to have been discussing business financing. My stomach tightened. Was he trying to borrow against the house? I don't believe he legally could. But he was certainly allowing someone to believe he had authority connected to that asset. The room suddenly felt much colder. For the first time that night, I realized the housewarming party had never been the real story. It had only been the doorway. Something much larger had been hiding behind it. And I had a feeling I was about to discover exactly how much my husband had been keeping from me. Daniel sent the documents before I could ask another question. I opened them at the dining table, beside the framed photograph I had planned to give Marilyn. The first file was an email chain between Ethan and a commercial loan officer. Ethan wrote that he had significant family real estate backing and expected practical control over a newly acquired asset worth nearly $6 million. He never claimed ownership outright. He arranged the truth so it cast the shadow he needed. I called Daniel back. How did you find this? The lender's attorney requested verification from the closing office. Ethan attached a preliminary title report. Did anyone respond? They told the lender he wasn't the purchaser and had no authority to pledge the property. Then why didn't anyone tell me? The inquiry was rejected. At the time, it looked like overconfident networking. And now? Now we review everything. By 10 the next morning, Daniel sat across from me in a conference room at his uptown Charlotte office. Rain streaked the windows. He had coffee waiting, along with the expression of a man who had found more than he wanted. I brought in a forensic accountant, he said. Her name was Priya Shah. She joined us by video and shared a spreadsheet built from our joint accounts, tax records, credit reports, and Ethan's transaction documents. The first number she showed me was $420,000. What is that? Capital Ethan invested in a real estate development partnership over the last 18 months. From where? $200,000 came from a personal brokerage account. $90,000 came from a home equity line tied to your residence. The rest came from 2 unsecured loans. My mouth went dry. I signed for the credit line. You signed when it was opened 6 years ago, Priya said. You did not approve these recent draws. We had opened it during a kitchen renovation and left it available for emergencies. Ethan handled the bank correspondence because I trusted him. How much is outstanding? $187,000 on the credit line. The unsecured loans total $263,000. Daniel slid a printed page toward me. There's also a personal guarantee. Marcus Hale. Marcus had been Ethan's college roommate and best man. For years, he sold small commercial properties around the Carolinas, always one deal away from becoming the man he claimed to be. The guarantee covered a construction loan for a mixed-use project outside Huntersville. How much exposure? Priya hesitated. Potentially close to $900,000, depending on what remains in the partnership. For several seconds, the only sound was rain tapping the glass. I thought about grocery lists, Nora's college fund, insurance renewals, and every ordinary conversation Ethan and I had held while this debt grew beneath us. He told me the partnership was consulting work. It wasn't, Daniel said. I called Ethan from the conference room. He arrived 40 minutes later wearing the same navy sport coat from the party. His eyes were red, but his posture remained defensive, as though he had come to negotiate rather than confess. He studied Priya's spreadsheet. "You went through everything." "Yes. You could have asked me." "I did, for years." He sat down. "It's not as bad as it looks." Daniel folded his hands. That phrase rarely improves financial statements. Ethan ignored him. "The development stalled because of permits and material costs. Marcus has buyers interested. Once the first phase closes, most of this gets paid back." "You borrowed against our home without telling me." "I was going to replace it." "You signed a guarantee." "It was temporary." "There is no temporary personal guarantee." His jaw tightened. "You don't understand the plan." "Then explain it." He stood and faced the window. For the first time, the anger left him. What replaced it was shame. "My mother has spent my entire life thinking I was going to do something important," he said. "Then I married you, and I became the husband of the woman who did everything better." "So this was about competing with me?" "No, it was about not disappearing next to you. You let me disappear for 17 years. He turned. "You let your mother believe I contributed nothing. You accepted praise for my work, my money, my decisions. You enjoyed being visible as long as I was erased." He lowered his eyes. "Marcus said this project would change everything. I thought I could pay back the loans, buy the mansion from the trust, and give it to Mom for real." There it was, the dream behind the lie. Not pure greed. Pride dressed as devotion. "You wanted to become the man she was already pretending you were." He did not deny it. I gave him 4 conditions: complete financial disclosure, immediate withdrawal from anything using my name or credit, a full explanation to Marilyn and Lauren, and marriage counseling with firm boundaries around his mother. He agreed too quickly. That should have warned me. The next morning, we met Marilyn and Lauren at the mansion. Moving boxes lined the foyer, and Lauren's children ate cereal at the kitchen island. Marilyn looked exhausted, but anger sharpened her voice. "You used your money to make us look like fools." "No, Ethan used my money to make himself look powerful." I explained the ownership structure, the unfinished occupancy agreement, and the debt. Lauren went pale. "I thought Ethan bought this place." "So did I," Marilyn said. I looked at Ethan. "Tell them why." He opened his mouth, but Lauren interrupted. "You told Mom Claire didn't want to come last night." Ethan's face changed. Marilyn turned. "You said she thought the party was beneath her." "I was trying to avoid a scene." Lauren shook her head. "No, you said Claire would embarrass you in front of the investors." The room went silent. "Investors?" Marilyn whispered. Lauren picked up the guest list and pointed to 3 names. These men weren't family friends. They were there for the development deal. I looked at Ethan and understood. He had not excluded me to protect his mother. He had excluded me because my presence threatened the performance. I placed the guest list on the marble counter. "You weren't celebrating a house," I said. "You were selling them a lie." Ethan did not answer me. He stood at the kitchen island with one hand resting beside the guest list, staring at the 3 names Lauren had circled. Outside, a landscaping crew moved quietly across the lawn, blowing leaves from a stone walkway that none of us had noticed the night before. Marilyn looked from Ethan to me. "What investors?" Her voice had changed. The outrage was still there, but now it was mixed with fear. Ethan rubbed his forehead. "They were people Marcus wanted me to meet." "At my housewarming?" "It wasn't supposed to be a pitch." Lauren gave a short, humorless laugh. "Then why did you seat them together and spend half the night showing them the wine cellar?" He turned on her. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know you told me to make sure the kids stayed upstairs during your private tour." Marilyn slowly lowered herself onto a bar stool. I had seen that movement before, usually after funerals or medical appointments. The moment when anger no longer had enough strength to hold a person upright. "You used my party," she said. Ethan looked at her. "Mom, I was trying to make this work." "For whom?" "For all of us." That sentence would once have softened me. Now I heard what it really meant. For all of us meant Ethan wanted everyone to share the consequences of decisions only he had made. I gathered the closing documents and returned them to my folder. This conversation is over for now. Ethan stepped toward me.
Claire, please.
No, Daniel and I are reviewing every account connected to my name, the trust, and our marriage. Until that is complete, you are not contacting lenders, investors, or brokers on my behalf. I never said you approved anything. You created that impression. That's not the same thing. It will feel exactly the same when their lawyers start asking questions. His face hardened.
You're going to destroy the project.
I looked at him. You keep talking as if the project is a living thing and I'm the threat. You borrowed money, concealed debt, and used a house you didn't own as evidence of financial strength. The project is not being destroyed. It is being seen clearly. That afternoon, I met Daniel at his office again. He had prepared 3 letters. The first went to the commercial lender, stating that neither I nor Hawthorne Residential Holdings had guaranteed Ethan's obligations. The second went to Marcus and the partnership, formally prohibiting the use of my name, credit, trust, or assets in any presentation, proposal, or financial document. The third went to the 3 investors who had attended the party. Daniel looked at me over his glasses. Once these are sent, the financing may collapse. I know. If Ethan's personal guarantee is enforceable, the consequences could be serious. I know. This is the last moment to delay. I thought about Nora sitting at the party while her grandmother mocked me, and Ethan guiding investors through a mansion purchased with my money. Send them. Daniel pressed a key. It was not dramatic. No champagne glass shattered. No police siren sounded. 3 emails left an office in downtown Charlotte, and the protection Ethan had been borrowing from my reputation disappeared. By the next morning, Marcus had called me 7 times. I did not answer. Ethan came home shortly after noon. His tie was loose, and his face was gray. Latham Capital pulled out. I was making tomato soup for Nora, who had stayed home from school with a headache. I stirred the pot and lowered the heat. I'm sorry. He stared at me. You're sorry? I'm sorry you made decisions that led here. They were ready to commit $2 million. Based on what? The development plans. And the belief that my assets were behind you. That wasn't the only reason.
But it was a reason.
He paced across the kitchen. Marcus says the bank may call the construction loan. We just need something temporary. What does temporary mean? A letter?
No.
You haven't even heard me. I have heard you for 17 years. His voice rose. I'm asking you to say you stand behind your husband. Nora appeared at the hallway entrance, wrapped in a blanket. Neither of us had heard her. Ethan stopped. She looked at him with an expression that made him seem smaller. Do you stand behind Mom? He opened his mouth. Nora continued. Because Grandma called her an embarrassment, and you didn't say anything. This is between your mother and me. No, it isn't. You brought me to that party. Nora, you always say you're keeping the peace. Her voice trembled, but she did not look away. You didn't keep the peace. You just picked who had to pay for it. Ethan's face collapsed. For 1 second, I saw the father he wanted to be and the man he had become standing in the same place. Nora turned and went back upstairs. Ethan sank into a chair. I never wanted her to see me like this. I turned off the stove. Then you should have behaved differently when you thought she wasn't watching. Later that evening, Marilyn called. Her voice was quiet. Lauren told me Ethan convinced me to put part of my home sale money into Marcus's project. I closed my eyes. How much? $250,000. I sat down. Did you sign documents? Yes, Ethan said it was safe. Where are they? He has copies. I told her not to sign anything else and to send every document to Daniel. For the first time, she did not argue. The review took 2 more days. Daniel found the personal guarantee we already knew about, along with revised partnership statements and lender presentations. Then he found a document titled Statement of Financial Support. My name appeared at the bottom. So did my electronic signature. I had never seen it before. The statement did not transfer money, nor did it legally bind the trust, but it declared that I was aware of Ethan's investment and supported his obligations. Daniel placed the printed page in front of me. This may be fraud. I studied the signature. It was mine in the same way a photograph is a person, recognizable but without consent, intention, or life. Ethan sat across from us, staring at the table. "Did you sign this for me?" I asked. He swallowed. "Marcus said it was only for the investor packet." "That wasn't my question." "I knew you would say no." The room became perfectly still. I had spent years excusing his weakness, his silence, his need for approval. I had called it insecurity because that sounded kinder than betrayal. I pushed the document toward him. "I can forgive weakness." He looked up. I placed my finger over the forged signature. "But this wasn't weakness." Ethan did not speak for several seconds. He stared at the forged signature as though it belonged to someone else. Someone reckless and desperate, someone he could still distance himself from if he found the right words. "I was going to fix it," he said. That sentence had become the graveyard of our marriage. "You have 48 hours, I told him. "Notify the bank and every investor that I never signed that document. Withdraw from Marcus's company and sign a temporary financial separation agreement." His eyes lifted. "And if I don't?" "Daniel will report the forgery." Ethan leaned back, stunned. "You do that to me?" "No, I'm giving you the chance to tell the truth before someone else proves it." He stood so quickly his chair scraped the floor. "You're destroying my life." I remained seated. "No, I'm refusing to let you build your life on mine." He looked at Daniel, perhaps hoping another man would translate my words into something softer. Daniel did not. "Voluntary disclosure matters," he said. "Waiting until the lenders discover this will make your position significantly worse." Ethan ran both hands through his hair. "What happens if I tell them?" "That depends on what Marcus has done, what you knew, and how quickly you cooperate." "And Claire?" Daniel glanced at me. "That depends on Claire." Ethan left without looking back. For the next 2 days, our house became unbearably ordinary. Nora went to school. I answered emails. The dishwasher ran. Packages arrived on the porch. Ethan slept in the guest room. We spoke only about practical things. "Did Nora take her medication?" "Yes." "The plumber is coming Thursday." "I know." "Are you still going to her school conference?" "Of course." There was something brutal about discovering that betrayal does not erase routine. You still buy milk, sign permission slips, and decide what to make for dinner. On the second evening, Marilyn came to the house. She stood on the porch, holding a folder against her chest. Without makeup, she looked older than 68. "I brought the investment papers," she said. She placed the folder on the kitchen table. The documents showed that Ethan had persuaded her to invest $250,000 from the sale of her old home into one of Marcus's affiliated entities. "I thought I was helping him," she said. "You were." Her eyes filled. "That isn't what I meant." "I know." She sat across from me. "Did you know?" "No." "Would you have stopped me?" "Yes." The answer hurt her, but I would not soften it. She looked toward the dining room, where the restored photograph still sat unopened. "I believed him because he was my son." "You believed him because his story made you feel proud." "I was proud of him." "And contemptuous of me." She flinched. "I only knew what he told me." "You believed what he told you because it gave you permission to think the worst of me." For once, Marilyn had no defense. The next morning, Ethan confessed. He sent formal notices through Daniel, admitting that I had not signed the statement, and that neither my trust nor Hawthorne Residential Holdings supported his obligations. He resigned from the development partnership and agreed to cooperate with the lender's review. The consequences came quickly. Latham Capital withdrew permanently. The bank froze additional construction funding and ordered an audit. Within a week, investigators discovered that Marcus had overstated pre-sales, shifted investor money between entities, and hidden contractor liens. Marcus called Ethan a coward. Ethan gave Daniel the voicemail. 3 more investors filed civil claims. The state opened an inquiry. Marcus denied everything until his accountant turned over records. Ethan was not the architect of the scheme, but he had ignored warning signs because success mattered more than honesty. His employer placed him on leave, then terminated him for failing to disclose the investigation. He sold his BMW, liquidated his remaining brokerage account, and surrendered his country club membership. None of it gave me pleasure. Satisfaction, yes. Relief, certainly. But pleasure would have required me to forget the man who once slept upright in a hospital chair when Nora had pneumonia, or the young husband who brought me coffee during tax season. Revenge is cleaner in stories than in life. In life, the person facing consequences is often someone you once loved. The mansion still needed a decision. I met Marilyn and Lauren there with Daniel. Boxes lined the hall, but no one had fully unpacked. "I'm selling the property," I said. Marilyn closed her eyes. Lauren nodded slowly. "You'll have 90 days. I'll cover reasonable moving expenses. Lauren, I'll also cover 6 months of rent so the children can remain in their school district while you stabilize." Lauren's eyes filled. "You don't have to do that." "I'm not doing it for Ethan." She understood. Marilyn asked, "Where am I supposed to go?" "Somewhere you can afford without needing anyone to lie for you." The words were sharp, but not cruel. Daniel explained that Marilyn's remaining home sale funds would be moved into a protected account outside Ethan's reach. She would have enough for a comfortable townhouse. A week later, I asked them to meet one final time in the mansion's dining room. I brought the lemon cake. I also brought the restored photograph. Marilyn stared at both. "These were for the party," I said. No one spoke. I placed the closing statement on the table. The page showed the purchase price, the escrow transfer, and the name of my trust. $5,800,000. Every cent traced back to me. "I came here that night prepared to celebrate all of you," I said. "I did not come to claim credit. I came because I believed this house could give the family stability." Marilyn began to cry. Lauren looked down. Ethan sat motionless. I did not raise my voice or remind them of every insult. I did not need to. The silence did it for me. Afterward, Ethan followed me to the foyer. "Is there any chance for us?" I looked at him for a long time. "The marriage we had is over." His face tightened. "That doesn't answer my question." "It's the only honest answer I have." He waited. "Whether we build something new depends on what you do when no one is protecting you from the truth." 8 months later, Ethan lived in a second-floor apartment above a dentist's office in Matthews. It was small and nothing like the house we had shared for 17 years. He drove a used Honda, worked in a lower-level business development role, and met with a therapist every Tuesday evening. Once a month, he attended a financial accountability group for people who had hidden debt or manipulated family assets. He never asked me to cover his rent. That mattered more than any apology. Our separation began quietly. There were no screaming matches in the driveway, no police cars, no dramatic custody battle. Ethan moved out with 2 suitcases, a box of files, and the grandfather clock his father had left him. Nora helped him carry it down the front steps. I watched from the doorway and felt something inside me break without making a sound. For the first few months, Ethan did what people often do when consequences are new. He treated accountability like a temporary punishment. He completed every task, attended every appointment, and waited for me to reward the effort by restoring the marriage. I did not. Change is not proven by how well someone behaves while being watched. It is proven by what they choose after they understand they may never get back what they lost. By the 6th month, Ethan stopped asking when he could come home. That was when I believed the work had finally become his. We filed for divorce soon afterward. The mediation took place in a plain conference room. Ethan accepted responsibility for the debts tied to his partnership, agreed not to make claims against my family trust, and worked with Daniel to structure repayment from his future income. I did